Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And on the program tonight, it is our All Things Canada edition, but we're going to be specifically looking, if my thing will let me, we're going to be specifically it's our All Things Quebec edition. So an even special focus on the major economic hub and Francophone province of Canada. Our guest for the hour or so is Alex Tyrell, leader of the Green Party of Quebec. He's an eco-socialist, anti-imperialist, left-wing politician, and also an indie journalist of Global Greens and then wider organization of the same name, and he's also host of the Eco Mindset, which he does bilingually, both in French and English. And we're also joined by Pierre Jasmin of Artists for Peace and also a member of the Canada-wide Peace and Justice Network. And let's get into it. First of all, Alex and Pierre, bien et vous, et j'espère tout va bien avec les deux. Comment ça va aujourd'hui?
Ah, ça va très bien, merci.
Oui, la température aujourd'hui a enfin atteint des niveaux tempérés. Enfin, on est à +4. On a été longtemps à -20. Alors,
Well,
voilà.
and folks, and that's all the French I have.
That's all. Okay.
So apologies for that. We will have to be switching in English, and for all the people who say, but Youri, aren't you based in Belgium and aren't you based in the Francophonie part? Yes, 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 and I've been suffering with that ever since. And but anywho, now, guys, before actually we get into Quebec history, Quebec and Quebecois current affairs and stuff like that. I did want to ask both of you this question, and we'll start with Pierre, who's a member of Artists for Peace. So, Canada, uh, unlike the Iraq War, where they pretended that they were that they were not part of the coalition of the willing, but they actually were. But that's a whole other topic for another day. But Canada is openly involved. Has is historically a partner in crime to the British Empire, and it's a partner in crime to the Anglo-American Empire. And when it comes to fake peacekeeping and NATO and so forth, Quebec, big business. Most of the major political parties are frontline, supportive of all the crimes against humanity you can imagine, from Libya, Syria, the clusterfuck that is the war in Ukraine, the pivot to Asia, and new Cold War with China, and recently, it's very sad, but there is a war right now. The U.S. and Israel, have launched a war on the Islamic Republic of Iran, and to my shock, I always thought that unlike Libya and Syria and Ukraine, the anti-war movement was a little bit more advanced in saying to people that a war with Iran would be catastrophic, regardless of what you think about the Islamic Republic. And we were very good at just pitching to the idea that whatever war is waged on Iran, it's a war, oil and mining and stuff like that. Now, Canada is supportive, as is Britain, as is France, the European Union, Germany. The U.S. Israeli aggression on the Islamic Republic of Iran. So, long. So my first question is this. I want your response, Pierre, and then Alex. My first question is this. Pierre, there has been a lot of Iranian artists. I can't remember the name of one of them, but there's an award-winning Iranian filmmaker who often is invited to Cannes, and when he's barred from entering Cannes, Julia Binoche or some actor goes solidarity for him, and of course during the women life of freedom stuff, and I won't say my controversial opinions on that. When there was those protests against patriarchy, sexism in Iran, many people in the film world were very supportive of efforts to topple the Islamic Republic of Iran. And in Britain, for example, and in Britain, there are two British stand-up comedians of Iranian backgrounds, and one of them, the joke, after the catastrophe that was Iraq, would say a lot of people don't know the difference between Iranians and Iraqis. Well, I'll tell you what the difference is. We're the ones that actually have weapons of mass destruction, and we're the ones that actually have religious laws as head of state.
Very true.
So that being said, in Artists for Peace, have you been able to make the anti-war case, the anti-imperialist case, that regardless of whatever legitimate grievances some of these Iranian artists, musicians, filmmakers, and whatnot have with the Islamic Republic of Iran, a war on Iran is not the way to go, especially led by the United States and Iran, the United States and Israel, especially under the current grotesque far-right leadership that is the Trump administration, and Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party, his far-right coalition in Israel. Your response to that, followed by Alex.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult time because the streets of Montreal were filled on Saturday with people sort of applauding the invasion.
Yeah.
There was also another manifestation, that, of course, could tell the people that a war is never the right way to change political alignment of a country. And we talked about that recently together, and with Ken, who is very Ken Stone of the Canada-wide Peace and Justice Association, and he's completely right, and we agree on that. And not only we do agree on that, but since we last talked with you, now we are 60 groups in this Canada-wide association, so that it's snowballing of people joining our meaning that war is always something terribly negative, something which, of course, attacks children, women mostly, and this is something which is proven by UNIDIR, the section, the disarmament section of the United Nations. Its chief is Izumi Nakamitsu, a Japanese, and she's written a very, very strong commitment that about gender disasters that are coming from war and everything. But it's true that people are confused and they think, it couldn't be worse. It could be worse. It is getting worse. Now we know there are more than 1,000 deaths, and destructions of different buildings, but not only buildings, but the waste of the. Oh, I'm looking for my English words today. It's bad for an interview. But the water supply and all these things. So that's it's a disaster, and one should never rely on war to change things. If people are curious, I've written 2 articles in the last 3 days that they can find on our site, which is www.artistespourlapaix.org, and they will see that one article is really focusing on women being sort of resisting against the whole trend of that comes with Trump right now, the whole trend of extreme right policies and anti-women policies as well, internationally, but also in those wars. So that's No, we've settled for no war resolution, but it's true that we have to explain to people who are saying, oh, but that means you are supporting the Ayatollahs and that you are supporting what they are doing to the women in... The situation is terrible. If you go to our site as well, you will see an article that I wrote 14 years ago, exactly on this date, I think, about a film which was called, and you talked about that in the introduction, a film by Panahi which was called The Separation. It won both the Oscar and the Festival of Cannes in France. And my critic was inspired by two twins, pianist twins that I taught, and they are now with a doctorate of l'Université du Québec à Montréal, and they explained the symbolism in the film with an old man which was like in the Mossad time, that means 1953, when he was deposed by the Americans because he didn't want to give them the Iranian petroleum.
Yeah,
there's another person.
Mossadegh, you meant. You said Mossad, but the Israeli Mossad is.
Oh no, Savak.
Yes,
no.
Mossadegh, the Democratic.
No, then afterwards came the terrible Shah with the Savak police, and for many years supported by Americans because he was giving them petroleum as much as they wanted. And then came, of course, the Ayatollahs, and as Ken Stone said, people think that because the women were forced to wear a hijab, that was a drawback. No, because a lot of women were filling different posts, political posts, and now comes this disaster by Trump, and it's very, very important to be behind, to supporting that, even if Iran is divided, as the film said, because there was a servant as well who was very, very religious and was for the Ayatollahs in the film, and there was a new girl of 10, 11 years old who was wishing to emigrate, and all this family with all the members gave a portrait of what Iran is, and we must support the people. We must, but not to try to play division against division, but we must love them all and say we must accept them all, and that's not what Trump is doing. Of course, Trump is putting a portrait that they are terribly aggressive, that they have an atomic bomb. I wrote a long article saying that this is not the true picture. They don't have a nuclear weapon, but they want electricity from nuclear origin, and that is very much portrayed by the International Agency for Nuclear Energy. And this association was led by El Baradei, who was a great Egyptian leader for that association. And he was replaced because the American wanted someone who was on their side. And this is absurd because, as Pugwash says, you cannot be on one side of nuclear weapons. They're destructive of everyone, regardless of their politics, which countries and everything. So he was replaced. He was doing a good job. There was a good progress in negotiations between the Americans and the Iranians. And now, because of this new leader who is Argentinian, the whole he went. That was in June when he declared that no, the Iranian people were on the verge of building a nuclear weapon. That was not true. But he said that, and immediately, of course, Netanyahu, like a bull having some red material in front of its eyes, he decided to invade. And we see right now this indecision with the right hand of Trump saying that he forced the United States to go into war, and of course Trump didn't like that because he appeared weak, and so he said the contrary, and so that's
I'm gonna have to cut you off, Pierre, because it's already 11:27, and I want to get Alex's comments on this.
And we want to address the topic of Quebec as well.
So Alex, so that being said, let me I want your response. So like I said, there are Iranians that are, God knows why, propaganda is hell of a drug, but there are Iranians, some who have legitimate grievances, that do want to see the Islamic Republic ousted. And I have been quite disturbed to see, from Canada to the United States to Germany to France, New Zealand, and Australia, lots of people protesting for the U.S. and Israel to bomb Iran, to overthrow the Islamic Republic, and the very well-funded Iranian diaspora expat community some of them are for the war. Some of them are openly for the war, and they're waving Israeli flags, and they have all kinds of and they have all kinds of stupid signs that say "Make Iran Persian again, make Iran great again, make Iran secular again," and so forth like that. Make Iran into the best friends of the United States or whatever Western bootlicking country, and and again I'm quite shocked about that, because I thought that when it came to anti-Iran war movement, we were much more advanced on that, but. Okay, so I'm curious, what would be your response if you meet if you meet one of those Iranians who are supportive of endless Western economic sabotage, terrorism, or as they like to call them, sanctions on Iran, and then others who actually are for Donald Trump and Israel overthrowing the Islamic Republic, because it's not that and they would argue, it's not that we agree with Netanyahu's policies on Palestine or Donald Trump's agenda in general. We want them to do good. We want Canada to do good, and them overthrowing the Islamic Republic of Iran, that is a good thing, unlike the catastrophe that was the Iraq War. And if we give them an example about Haiti and so forth, they'd be like, yeah, well, that's different. This is the good war. What would be your response to them?
Well, I mean, I've spoken with some of those people online and in person, and I find it unfortunate to see people from the Iranian community flying the Israeli flag in rallies in Montreal, and of course these groups are really propelled by the mainstream media, which gives them a massive tribune to broadcast this message, whereas many of the Iranians here are actually strongly opposed to the U.S. Sanctions and the U.S. military action against Iran, including killing the leadership. But those voices are not nearly as present in the mainstream media. So that is a real big problem. And although Quebec has a history of generally opposing war a bit more than English Canada, this tradition is dying, it appears. And, since the war in Iraq, where Quebec played a big role in pressuring the Canadian Federation not to participate with, a massive demonstration in downtown Montreal, and the major political parties in the National Assembly voting a motion against Canada's participation in the war in Iraq. Jean Chrétien, famously stood up in the Parliament and said that Canada will not participate. But since then, and since the war in Afghanistan, Quebec has really taken a slide backwards when it comes to opposing war. And more and more, we're seeing kind of a unanimous support from the political class here in support of U.S. Military intervention. If you look at what's happening in this conflict now with Iran, the Green Party of Quebec stands alone in condemning the U.S. strikes on Iran. And
So not
even
so not even Quebec Solidaire is opposed to any kind of Western imperial action on Iran.
Well, there is one member of the National Assembly from Quebec Solidaire, Andreas Fontecilia, who put out a statement condemning what's taking place, condemning the U.S. Intervention. But we haven't heard from the official spokespeople of the party and the leadership. And even yesterday, the party leader, Ruba Gazal, put out a statement, a very cryptic statement about the impact of war on women, and kind of said that, it's Donald Trump, the patriarchy versus the Iranian patriarchy, and that women are the victims of this, and that women, don't have that much of a say in decisions about war and that sort of thing. But of course, she is a woman in politics in a time of war and does not have a clear position here and is not clearly condemning the U.S. intervention in Iran. So I think that's a huge problem. And I find it very regrettable that on an issue that's so clear, the United States has no business interfering in Iran. And it's not like as if like this whole regime change situation is going to be something that's going to be wrapped up in a week there. Like this is going to go on for months and years, and already the war has spread to many other countries. The Iranians are retaliating predictably against U.S. military bases and against countries that host those bases, all across the Middle East. So it's really unfortunate how the propaganda machine has really whipped up an incredible amount of support for this. I mean, there are polls coming out of the United States this week that say 60% of people, of Americans, are against the U.S. intervention in Iran. So, the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, initially supported 100% the U.S. actions and now is saying that he supports them with regret. So there is a certain amount of, pushback against this support. But unfortunately, in Quebec politics, other than the Green Party, it hasn't materialized yet. And, for every US-backed war, there's always some fairy tale story that goes along with it to say why it's a good thing. And when they
Yeah.
invaded Iraq, I remember watching the coverage at the time, and they had people in Baghdad saying, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Bush. Thank you for coming here." Okay, there's a similar narrative around Afghanistan,
Yeah.
or around the NATO proxy war in Ukraine, right? Where people are, oh, we're calling for American help and all this sort of thing. And, even so, the mainstream news would say that, oh, even some Russian people are backing the US support of Ukraine, this sort of thing. So the war propaganda machine is well polished, is a well-oiled machine. And it's convincing. It's difficult for people to uh, hear opinions that run against it in the media environment that we have. And so, you have these groups of, Iranians, marching in the streets with US flags. And, this is one very important piece of this propaganda system, but it is somewhat effective. And my hope is that, we can really rebuild the anti-war movement to what it was back during the U.S. invasion of Iraq, when all these people were marching in the streets and, pressuring the governments, and the governments were responding to that criticism. At the moment, the anti-war movement is very small. It's fragmented. A lot of the, you know, bigger, more mainstream anti-war groups have gone along with supporting the war against Russia, for example. Perspectives, like my own, that are very critical of NATO and very critical of Canadian and American actions have been pushed out of a lot of circles, both in
Yeah.
the media and inside certain anti-war groups. So it's a big problem, and people need to rise up and oppose this pro-warfare agenda. Um, people have been frightened by the mainstream media. Just today, I was at a fast food restaurant at a Subway, and the person was telling me that oh, we spend all this money helping Cuba. We shouldn't be sending money down there. And they say, oh, well, what about military spending? Oh, well, that's a very complicated thing, and we probably do need that and this sort of thing. So there's a lot of people that by consuming the mainstream media have opinions, casual opinions. You know what I mean? Like not everybody who has an opinion on this is a politician. It's not everybody that has a job to think about, where they stand on these issues, right? People have casual opinions that they develop in passing. And, unfortunately, a lot of those people have been conditioned to think that military spending and military escalation is sort of the only way forward or necessary, when in reality, Canada's participation, or at least political support of this attack on Iran, puts Canadians at risk. It destabilizes the geopolitical environment. It makes Canada vulnerable to retaliation. I mean, the other U.S. allies have been retaliated against. Bombs have fallen on those countries, right? Okay, Canada's in a different continent and all that, but could still be targeted. And Canadian citizens abroad could be targeted. And, this is a horrible situation. And, it says a lot about the state of the left in Quebec and Canada, and the need to embrace anti-war politics and the need to really rebuild the anti-war movement.
Before, and
Alex, I think that you're drawing too dark a picture. I mean,
Yeah.
last week, another Alex, Alexandre Boulris, who is the spokesperson for the NDP right now, because until they have another chef that will be at the end of March, they will elect a new leader. But until then, he is the spokesperson for external affairs, for international policy. And he condemned the American intervention in very strong terms. And everything he wrote is in our article about
Yeah, but the thing
the
is, just the
war.
week before, that same individual, Alexandre Boudrias, was posting about his support for Ukraine without any form of nuance or anything.
Yeah,
Was at
that's right.
a rally, waving the flag and
Yeah,
everything, and
but we're
attacking Russia.
talking about right now Iran, and he was very clear.
Yeah,
And also, he went as far as saying Canada should never go along with a Netanyahu who belongs in a prison in La Hague.
yeah. But I mean
So
that goes back
these are
to
very strong words coming from the official spokesman of the NDP. So
yeah.
that's one thing, and
But it's a federal party, and it also illustrates the point that I was making earlier about even sections of the anti-war movement supporting some wars, but not others,
yeah, yeah.
depending on where public opinion is, depending on what the media context is. So, I mean, it's great that Alexandre Boulris is speaking out against what's happening with Iran, but he's giving support to the NATO proxy war in Ukraine. And we need to stop with this half measures, and we support half wars, but not the other half. Like, we need to
no,
build the
I agree
anti-war
with you.
movement to the point where we're able to
In
oppose all wars
fact,
at all time.
last question about foreign policy before we talk about Quebec. Although foreign policy is going to come up when we do talk about specifically Quebec history and Quebec current affairs, is the following. Because first of all, it's great that there was such a huge anti-Iraq war movement, and I'm talking about anti-Iraq war movement. Canada now it's also important to say the following. First of all, most of the Canadian corporate press was for the invasion of Iraq because of the large, unprecedented demonstrations. The ruling Liberal Party officially did not join the Iraq War, but secretly Canada was part of the coalition of the willing. So it's important to note that. And while it's great that there was while it was great that there was that there was huge anti-war demonstrations against the Second Iraq War, there wasn't those kinds of demonstrations against, say, the Afghanistan War. And Haiti, I mean, unlike Saddam Hussein, who you can make the argument, he was a brutal dictator. Haiti, Canada overthrew a democratically elected socialist government, a guy who was on the front line against Western-backed dictatorship, Jean-Bertrand Aristide against Papa Doc and Baby Doc, and there was no massive anti-war demonstrations there. In fact, much of the left, NGO left, respectable left, celebrity left of Canada, and in Quebec in Quebec specifically, the supported the ouster of Jean-Bertrand Aristide, and then like I said, while the war drums for Iran were getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and America and its allies decided economic terrorism was a preferred method as opposed to F-35 military jets bombing the place and letting Israel assassinate nuclear scientists who weren't building nuclear weapons. Like once upon a time, the anti-war movement, specifically on Iran, was quite advanced, and you could, but there was none of that same advancement when it came to when it came to Ukraine, when it came to Libya, and when it came to Syria, and when it came to Syria. So that is a big problem. So while we should applaud the generation of the 1960s against the Vietnam War, we should also be applauding the anti-war movement, which was against the First World War. And while we should give credit where credit is due to the big anti-war demonstrations against the Second Iraq invasion, 2001, those are the exceptions of the rules. Most time, people are selectively anti-war and not consistently anti-imperialist, as Alex just demonstrated right there. Pierre,
I don't agree with you, Youri. I don't agree with you at all. I mean, really? we built a sculpture which was £1,000 of a piano for peace, and we brought it to Jean-Bertrand Aristide to show our solidarity, and with a group, many groups of supporting the Jean-Bertrand Aristide trying. That was, and the day we gave this piano in the palace of Jean-Bertrand Aristide, he brought all the generals, he made a speech to them and said, see, this is a symbol of disarmament, and I want you to know that from now on, the army of Haiti does not exist anymore. This was strong left movement, and it was a risk for us to be in Haiti for doing this. Another thing I want to say about Iran is that the former chef of Quebec Solidaire, Amir Kadir, who is Iranian himself, and his wife, Nima Machouf, who was on board of two different ships of the flotilla of peace towards Gaza, and of course she was put in prison. And she's an NDP candidate. She ran against Stephen Guilbeault, the Minister of Environment, who resigned. So yes. These are strong.
Who wants to green the military?
Anyway, but this is strong. Like he was the leader of the Quebec for the Liberal Party. He was the Minister of Environment before Carney came. But now you have Nima Metrov also running in the street saying that we should never support this war, and she's opposing that. And Amir Kadir does the same, and Amir Kadir is very well respected by the Quebec Solidaire. So these are strong involvements of Quebec against the Iran or against the Trump war against Iran. So I wanted to just
Alex, final response to that before I change subjects.
Well, I think it's great that Amir Kadir is saying that, but he's not the spokesperson for Quebec Solidaire anymore. And I wish that the current spokespeople in that party would have the same kind of courage. I mean, Amir Kadir was known for, throwing the shoe at George Bush's poster and all that in the streets. I wish that Quebec Solidaire was more operating under that kind of logic and that kind of approach than what we see now, which is an unwillingness to condemn, even the most outrageous acts of the U.S. empire.
Yeah, but Ruba Ghazal is Palestinian. Put yourself in her shoes. She does not have to state violently or even softly that she's for Iran against the war. She's suffered through the war, and she's very much left-leaning, and you should not accuse her of being soft.
But this is the thing, is that relying on personal credibility through identity, in my view, does not excuse silence on such an issue. And it's not because Ruba Ghazal is of Palestinian descent that she doesn't have to announce her support for sanctions on Israel, for example. And if anything, Quebec Solidaire is using this identity to water down their politics by saying, look, we have somebody with this identity, therefore we don't have to be outspoken on the issue anymore.
I'm sorry. I cannot stand with this, because she has all the courage to say these things.
Well, what did she say?
Okay, it's not her who's not saying that. It's the media who are not
it's her. It's her statement.
What she believes and what she wants to convey. And you should accuse the media of...
Well, I mean, I can't accuse the media because she hasn't put out a statement that they haven't covered. She's put out this statement where it's wishy-washy, where it's unclear who's to blame. And even I tweeted at her over 24 hours ago asking if she would clearly condemn Trump's actions against Iran, and I'm left without an answer.
Well, she's another party. I mean, you cannot expect that other parties should pay respect to your opinion as much.
Answer the question.
We know the opinion she has, and we respect, and I have not meetings, but discussions with her, and it's very clear that she's pro-peace.
Well, the private discussions, in my view, don't count, And, if you, for example, when there was the shooting on Bondi Beach in Australia, within less than an hour, Ruba Ghazal issued a statement calling it an anti-Semitic attack, condemning it, and so on. Meanwhile, we have Trump starting a war in the Middle East, and suddenly it's not important enough to comment on. I mean, it's not that those people are not important.
And then not only that, well, listen, let me just say the following, and I'm curious both of your responses, is this. You see, this is kind of the problem when it comes to the anti-war movement, if you want to call it that, and even the anti-imperialist movement, is that we have people who are selectively anti-war as opposed to consistently anti-imperialist. So when there is mass demonstrations against the genocide in Gaza or the Iraq War, the second Iraq War, politicians, even if they give bad statements, will say that I'm on the side of the people. I'm on the side of my constituencies who say that they do not want this war. Whereas and when it comes to Iran, the positions of most people I'm not impressed with, because it's either they are supportive of Donald Trump and Netanyahu's actions on Iran, or if they're not supportive of full-out war, they are supportive of Western economic sanctions, which I call terrorism, economic sabotage. There are lots of left-leaning people and leftists who are supportive of sanctions on the Islamic Republic of Iran, but not full on, war, especially if it's led by Donald Trump and Netanyahu. But I'm pretty sure if it was Obama, and who gives a shit about Netanyahu, but if it was Obama and Keir Starmer, the ones who cooked up with this half-brain idea, and Justin Trudeau, I bet you, I'm going to be a betting man and say I bet you people are going to be supportive of, whatever, economic terrorism followed by full-out war, like they did with Libya and Syria and Ukraine, because we're on the side of all the people who are protesting on the streets against their corrupt government, so forth and so forth.
Well, I mean, you could say the same thing about Canada right now, because we have a liberal prime minister, right? So it's a liberal government that's supporting Trump's action in Iran. If it was a conservative prime minister, perhaps the left would be a lot more organized.
Yeah.
Yeah, except that yesterday I wrote an article as Secretary General of Les Artistes pour la Paix, asking for Anita Anand to resign as External Affairs Minister because of the way she behaved in front of a microphone before leaving India. When she said on one side, I am with the Prime Minister, and the other side, I am for the international order. This article is titled, United Nations is against the American invasion of Iran. And because nowhere in our newspapers they are writing the simple fact that the Secretary General of UN is opposing this war. That shows how much propaganda has invaded our newspapers and medias. There's only the Presenza.com, which is telling the truth about these things. But in Quebec, we have asked, because I've talked with Anita Anand, I've written to her. There's a lot of letters back and forth in the last 2 years after she became External Affairs Minister, and I congratulated her for some of the moves that she did and everything, so that there is this relationship with Les Artistes pour la Paix and her. And yesterday, nevertheless, I said it's time to resign. It's time to resign like Stephen Guilbeault did. It's time to resign like the two ministers of Aboriginal origin, First Nations minister.
But
Philpott, Minister of Justice, and Raybould, he was Minister of Energy, and protesting against nuclear, the SNC Lavalin terrible mischiefs in Libya. And now, yesterday, she was there signing a document with India, making sure that $2.6 billion of uranium from Saskatchewan would be delivered to India, who hasn't signed. I don't talk about only the Prohibition Treaty. If she hasn't signed even, India hasn't signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is very weak, a treaty which has the 32 NATO countries inside, but it has India is not there, Pakistan is not there, Pierre. Israel is not there, of course, and then she's accepting that Canada would deliver $2.6 billion, not million, $billion of uranium. And this is something that we as Artists for Peace couldn't stand. and I don't think she will write to me anymore.
But Pierre, okay, she's acting like a typical liberal. This is what the Liberal Party, does all the time.
Agree.
But my issue with the state of the anti-war movement in general, and history does back me up on this, is the is the following. I think too many people, including veterans of the peace movement, who were involved in the anti-Vietnam War demonstrations and those who were involved in the anti-Iraq War demonstrations, the second of Iraq, in general, those two wars and the First World War are the exception to the rule. Most of the time, the broad left is supportive of imperialism, de facto supportive, or is openly supportive of it, and I think we focus a little too much on both the Vietnam War and the Iraq War, when in general, an organization like yourself, which I have great admiration for, but you guys are the exception to the rule, because if you look at Hollywood, you can still be blacklisted and lose your job if you're for if you're Palestinian liberation. Certainly, if you have the opinions that we all have on the Western-backed Ukraine proxy war with Russia, we would all be canceled.
Yeah. Okay, so, as an artist for peace, you just talked about Hollywood. We'll check on Sunday if the film A Battle After Another will win the Oscars. And this is the great film, anti-war film, anti-Trump film. It won the BAFTA Awards, the British Awards, last 2 weeks ago. And it's the most anti-war film that you can imagine. And we'll see if Hollywood regroups all the conservative powers and they succeed in blocking this film. You will be right saying that the Hollywood right has won.
Well, I've not seen the movie, so I can't make an opinion. But I can guarantee you, there were actors in Hollywood that was against the Iraq War, and then those same actors.
No, right. I know. I know that.
We're supportive of Western sanctions on Iran for developing non-existent WMDs. Ben Affleck did that stupid film Argo, which completely minimizes how awful the Shah was and so forth. And
it was fabricated.
And Jon Stewart did a film that focuses on Iranian human rights abuses. There's another film called Desert Dancer, which was also very critical of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I don't see an avalanche of indie and Hollywood films and British films that are critical of the Saudi government, of the Qatari government, or anything like that, but they are critical of the Islamic Republic. And again, and while there have been some great films that show Palestinian suffering and so forth, they are the exceptions to the rules. And
you're right.
And at the end of the day, your career will advance if you stand by Israel, not if you stand by Palestine. Although credit where credit is due, there are people like Roger Waters, Wolf Alice, Paloma Faith, Marina, Kneecap, and so forth, Bob Villain, and so forth, who are using their platform, Malcolm Moore and so forth, that are speaking up for Palestine. But that still is a very small group compared to an entire industry that says BDS on Israel. So I just think it's important to put that out there, that the anti-war movement in general tends to be far too small. We do have to step our game up, and it's just very disheartening when you see so many people who, if they're not supportive of full-out invasion regime change, they are supportive of Western sanctions on the Islamic Republic of Iran. And Alex, your response to that, followed by Pierre, and then we do have to change subject.
Yeah. So on what question specifically?
that it's the exception to the rule that our movement is able to advance, and it's only when it comes to a specific war, not the entire grotesque system that is Western imperialism.
That's it. I mean, that's the big weakness of the anti-war movement right now is that it's easily fragmented. Each time there's a new conflict that comes up, the people don't see eye to eye, and what we're really missing is voices that oppose all war, right? It's always right at the moment. It's very selective. It's not this one, but no to this one, but yes to the other. And we need some real leadership that's willing to say no to everything. I mean, even here in the Montreal municipal election, we had one candidate, Craig Sauvé, running for a somewhat left-wing party, and he actually, justified his support for sanctions on Israel by saying that he supports Ukraine and all that, So
Exactly.
it's always like one and then the other, progress and then stepping backwards. So we need a strong anti-war movement that can put an end to that, and that everybody can just be, well, maybe not everybody, but that people in the movement can be against everything, not for one and against the other.
And also,
but we need to support. We need to support those exceptions,
yes.
Like the film Soundtrack to a Coup d'État about Lumumba won the FIFA. Which is not the Football Association in Montreal, it's the Festival International des Films pour l'Art. It won the prize last year. So this is courageous, a film about the whole life of Lumumba with jazz musicians being hired by United States in order to try to blur the line, but the film shows that
right now.
The film shows that precisely. Let's congratulate this, or let's congratulate the film by Avi Mograbi, the 54 first years, a manuel abrégé d'occupation militaire about Gaza, and it's there. It's being presented also, despite the difficulty to do that. And we know how hard it is. And an example in my article that I wrote yesterday was this film, which was called Amsterdam, who showed the 1933 Nazi movement in the United States trying to depose Roosevelt. And Robert De Niro was playing that military man, preventing this, courageously preventing this. And this is a film with actors like even Madame Swift is in the film, but also many other great actors. It was a film. Of course, and of course, this was sabotaged by the Hollywood industry. But what I want you to know is that it's very hard for artists to try to oppose, and this is something we should support them, and not saying, "Oh, there are too few." Where do you go with that line?
Well,
there are not enough of them. This is not the right way, I think, if we want to progress.
Okay, well, I'll just we will respectfully agree to disagree. Now, this is part one of our discussion. Join us for part two, where we're going to be talking about Quebec. Be right back.